You deserved everything you got. This is a union city.
That is a Philadelphia tradition.
Seize the means of podcasting.
Oh, God, the boss has crushed us.
Let me tell you one thing else.
In oldie-timey times,
The pleasure of the flesh is in solidarity.
we will not raw dog reality for that one.
It's going to be wholly unprofessional.
The Scab Buster.
What have we become?
Keep together strong. Let that be your mantra.
Hello, and welcome to the Labor John podcast, where I, and the rest of a group that includes me, talk about the working class history of Philadelphia and the surrounding world. My name's Sam. How you doing? You doing all right?
I'm doing all right.
I wasn't talking to you, Gabe. I was talking to our lovely listeners and our lovely, lovely patrons. And this is the last I'll be talking for the rest of the episode, because I'm going to pass the mic over to...
I'm Gabe.
What are we going to be talking about today?
So, the United Auto Workers, UAW,
Yes.
just finished one of their largest strikes in a long time, and got a tentative agreement from the big three motor companies of Ford, GM, and Stellantis.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not talking about the UAW. We're talking about the Auto Workers Union that came before the UAW.
All right.
And one of the early attempts to organize the auto industry, the 1933 Ford strike in Chester, Pennsylvania.
All right. I like it. 1934.
33.
33.
Did I say 34?
Gabe, I have no idea. I'm on autopilot.
I might have blended 33 and Ford.
I might edit the
one.
shit out of this to make myself correct. But okay, it's a 1933 strike.
Yeah.
Okay.
But before we get into that,
Oh God.
there's this guy named Henry Ford.
All right, a friend of the show.
Yep.
Beginning now, I think that we haven't really talked about the automakers.
No,
I don't think we talked about it really at all. Really, as far as
not really. There are some automaker strikes that we need to get into at some point around
Yeah.
Philly. But this guy, Henry Ford,
Yeah.
really nice guy, liked Jews,
Mhm.
loved black people,
Timely.
loved unions, really, really good guy. And he formed a company in 1901 called the Henry Ford Company.
Okay.
And can you tell me what that's called today?
Trump Enterprises.
Close. It's the Cadillac Motor Company.
Okay.
Then in 1903, thank you for pretending to be surprised on the second time we've recorded this.
We've only recorded the first 5 minutes of this episode, Gabe.
True.
I thought we were done peeling back the curtain, but all right, it's coming back.
Yep. So then 1903, Henry Ford, I'm just going to keep plowing through it. 1903,
Plow through it,
Henry Ford founded another motor company called the Ford Motor Company.
Okay.
That still exists.
Yeah. Heard of them.
Yeah. They're kind of big. So they expanded.
Physically.
Yeah.
Fucking physically.
Yes. Anyway, my rant's about oversized cars. So they expanded throughout the early 1900s. By 1933, they had plants all across the U.S. In 1927, they opened up an assembly plant in Chester, Pennsylvania,
Okay.
at the intersections of Front and Lloyd Streets. The original plant was over 50 acres of land and basically sat between the street, railroad tracks, and the river.
How many football fields is that?
I don't know the conversion rate of 50 acres to football fields.
Okay. We have a lot of Americans listening.
That's true. It's probably only like 2 or 3 F-150s at this point. So just line them up side by side, and that's the plan. Okay, so, but the plant was set up to produce Ford Model A's and employed around 5,000 people, from what I can tell.
Okay.
But now let's talk about the people that worked there, because
Good.
Ford had some funny ideas on how workers should be treated.
Oh no.
So he had a combination of like, and I should say, especially by the end of the 1920s, Henry Ford himself was basically like running the entire company almost as his personal dictatorship, because he had kicked out all of the other members of the board, and he went a little nutty.
Starting to have second thoughts about this guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was a character. So
Assembly line, Gabe.
yeah,
Assembly line.
so the assembly line and scientific management, which is like the early version of give people a pizza party instead of raises.
I'm just here to whitewash Mr. Ford.
I mean, that's, as proud Americans, that is our job. So, combination of scientific management, lots of virulent anti-unionism, some like enlightened welfare capitalism, and then also a fair amount of racism and anti-Semitism. Just kind of like all stewing together in a big pot.
What a concoction.
Yeah. So what did that mean for the people that actually worked there? In the 1920s, it was probably a decent job. In 1914, Ford introduced the $5 day, which was actually pretty high wages. So they literally had like lines of people trying to get a job at Ford plants. And that was his goal. He wanted to, he knew that if he increased wages, he would, avoid a labor shortage.
That's kind of, I don't know about that, Gabe.
I know.
I've heard different from different sources here.
Yeah, it's a crazy idea.
My sources are Sky News and Fox.
Yes. Fox Business is it. That's where I get all of my news.
Fox has no business in news, I'll tell you that.
Oh God. Okay, so the 1929 stock market crash led to a decline in people buying cars.
Yeah.
Because, they were still they weren't a luxury item at this point, but they weren't a necessity.
Yeah.
So car sales went down. Folks couldn't afford them. This led to mass unemployment in all of the major auto manufacturing centers around the country.
Mm-hmm.
Most notably Detroit, which had been like the center of car production in the U.S.
Friend of the show, RoboCop.
Yep.
That's my knowledge of Detroit. That and the Red Wings. That's it.
I mean, that's fair.
But it's like one of my favorite cities. I want to go to Detroit more than anywhere else. I don't know why. It's the Philly in me. It's like, I don't know.
From the people that I've talked to that have visited like both or Philly, Detroit, and Chicago, a lot of people say that they all have very similar vibes.
Yeah.
It's that like gritty, smaller post-industrial city.
Yeah. I like that. Gabe.
It's the best place to live. Unless you're unhoused or displaced by the fact that it's post-industrial. But anyway.
Just let me enjoy a fucking moment on this show.
Well, it's about to get even more depressing. So
I know.
Reduction in car manufacturing led to a 30% unemployment rate in the city of Detroit by 1932. People were getting very desperate, and hunger. And we're getting very hungry. So the Detroit Unemployed Council organized a hunger march to go demand that the plants reopened. And in March 1932, between 3,000 and 5,000 unemployed workers marched on on Ford's Rouge River plant. And the response to this was cops firing tear gas, using freezing cold water cannons.
Yeah.
And then once the violence escalated, they started firing live rounds into the crowd.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
What? No.
So 5 people were killed, and many more were seriously injured.
That sucks. I always hate. I always hate when I hear that. You know.
Yeah, it's not great. But all of this to say that Mr. Ford wasn't really interested in listening to the demands of the masses. Surprisingly, for someone that kicked out like all the rest of his board and is running it as a one-man show.
It's having all that money, man. That's what happens to you, man.
Yeah. I shudder to think what would happen if like Tesla workers marched on Musk's mansion.
Oh my God.
It would be terrifying.
Hold on, Gabe. I'm writing a 1980s sci-fi thriller here in my head. Jesus.
I mean,
Arnold Schwarzenegger has to play the main rebel, the union organizer, for some reason. And although I don't think you see what?
Current Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Okay. Hey, he still looks pretty good.
Yeah. So now we're going to go up to July 1933, when the National Industrial Recovery Act went into effect. We covered this a little bit with the Lansdale hosiery strike. Basically, the NIRA said that federal government support, or the federal government supported workers' rights to organize, and every major industry had to abide by like this sort of self-regulating code. That was almost basically they established like industry wages across all of the major industries in the country, including the auto industry. The Northern Irish Republican Army said all that? Yep, surprisingly.
Oh, wow, crazy.
They had a surprising amount of political sway in the United States in 1933 for some reason. So
they weren't busy at all.
Yeah. For the auto industry, that code, or the code that they were supposed to follow, was a 35-hour work week and a $4 per day minimum wage. Now, the problem with all of this is that you technically didn't have to sign on to it. It was still like sort of voluntary.
Okay.
So Ford decided that he didn't want to follow the NRA code, and instead proposed his One Better program. So they, instead of following the official NRA code of 35 hours a week, $4 a day minimum wage, he announced that they would stay at a 40-hour week with a $4.80 per day minimum wage. Some skilled workers were already making upwards of $10 a day. So this would have put Ford ahead of all of the other manufacturers in terms of wages. But it's also important to remind everyone that he had already implemented a $5 day back in 1914. So
yeah, I was thinking that. I was like, wait a minute. What happened 20 years ago? So if that had actually kept up with inflation, he would have been paying $6.50. Of course. Oh my God.
By 1933. So really, Ford workers were going down by $1.70 a day, which comes out.
No, sorry. No, I was going to say, I'm so glad that kind of like bullshit is nothing new.
Yeah.
It's always been around.
Yeah. It
comes with the territory of capitalism.
Yep. And I didn't find, or couldn't find where Ford had lowered the minimum wage that he had set in 1914, or when he dropped the $5 day. But I'm guessing it was probably around the stock market crash. But I didn't bother to go looking deeper because
I appreciate that, Gabe.
Yep.
I'm making this episode longer than it should be.
He also maintained 5-day work week with 8-hour days, obviously. So
Okay.
they were getting paid better than people in other auto companies, but they weren't getting paid as well as they were prior to all of this.
Yeah.
So the other problem with all of this is that this all came out of Ford headquarters in Detroit. And there was a lot of confusion as to how and when all of this would be implemented, actually in the factories. So the management at the plant in Chester said that they didn't know of any new plans to start the new pay scheme. They said that they knew there were plans to discuss a new pay scheme, not to implement a new pay scheme.
Okay. Those are two very different things.
Yes. So the Chester plant was basically saying, like, yeah, we're probably not going to actually do any of this. When the workers were coming and asking, when are you going to start implementing these codes? So throughout September of 1933, the National Recovery Agency continued to pressure Ford to accept the terms of the auto code. Ford kept refusing to sign, then said that he would comply with it, but wouldn't sign it.
My brain can't figure that one out.
Yeah, basically,
I mean, he'll just go along with it for now, but he's not going to be like, this is going to be official.
and not signing it means that he's not legally bound to it.
Yeah.
So
All
he
right.
can, he can still change it whenever he wants.
God damn it.
Uh-huh.
I hate trying to find the good in people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So he was refusing to go to the 35-hour week. That was his big sticking point.
Okay.
Then he eventually changed his mind on that and agreed to pay the hourly rate that was, or the hourly equivalent of $4 a day, which was 50 cents an hour, but for a 32 to 38 hour week that varied week to week. So you didn't know like how long your week was going to be every week.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. That sucks.
Yeah.
It takes me back to working at Target. Like, oh yeah, no, your schedule changed. It's like I'm here. It's like, nah, you're not working today. It's like I'm fucking here, motherfucker.
Yeah. Ford's scheme meant that workers would only be getting $16 a week, or could get as low as $16 a week.
Yeah.
When they were supposed to be making $20 a week. And they got pretty pissed about that.
Yes.
At this point, there weren't any unions at the Chester plant and barely any unions anywhere in the Ford company. There were like a couple machinists and skilled tradesmen that had an AFL craft union.
Okay.
And that was it. It was basically one of those things where it's like 10 guys at this one Ford plant have the I turn this knob on the lathe union, and that's it.
You just wanted to use that word.
I do. Lathe is a fun word. And the AFL had was supposed to have like initiated a campaign back in 1926, I think, to organize Ford, and never did anything with it.
Oh shit!
But they theoretically were supposed to support a Ford union if it ever showed up.
Okay.
But at 10 a.m. on September 26, 1933, somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 Ford workers walked out of the Chester, Pennsylvania plant.
Damn.
Their demands were $25 for a 40-hour week, which came to 5 8-hour days at $5 an hour. So they had raised their demands, or at $5 a day, not $5 an hour. Workers in Philly had apparently struck the day before, and then news traveled south to Chester. And so the Chester or the Philly plant struck, and then Chester struck, but they were much larger, so they kind of took over everything.
Okay.
But anyway, on the 26th, workers massed out in front of the plant, not actually setting up any like picket lines. They basically just sat in the grass and almost had like a picnic. The Chester police were there, but they basically said like the gathering's peaceful. We're not gonna mess with them right now. And they just kind of watched it happen. And then Ford police, who were also probably more heavily armed than the Chester police at this point, they stayed in the plant and kept an eye on the couple hundred workers that were still inside.
Scabs.
Yeah. So then a 10-man committee was elected and went to negotiate with management. They returned with a counteroffer of 2.5 cents per hour. Oh, a 2.5 cents per hour raise for some of the workers in the next pay envelope, and then another 2.5 cent per hour raise the following week.
Okay.
And this was immediately hooted down, as the Inquirer reported it.
Okay.
So they reaffirmed their demands and said that they weren't going to budge from them. And then all of the strikers marched off to the Lithuanian Hall up the street in Chester.
Okay.
And at this point, an organizer from the AFL came down to talk to them. And apparently one of the workers from the plant in Chester volunteered $15. So like 3 days' wages to start the official process for union accreditation with the AFL. So,
okay.
They started the paperwork and got an actual union going.
Hey, nice.
Then the next day, Ford ordered the plant closed until the strike was resolved. And pay attention to that one because it gets tricky.
Can you repeat it then?
Ford ordered the plant closed until the strike was resolved.
Okay.
So, the National Recovery Administration got very interested in the strike and wanted to provide a mediator to resolve it as quickly as possible. J.F. Dewey was dispatched from the NRA Labor Board to negotiate, and A.M. Harris of the AFL arrived in Chester to talk to both the workers and management. But the worker or the AFL didn't actually want a mediator yet because they had only just started the union and they didn't have enough people with cards signed.
Okay.
So their worry was that if negotiations started, the bargaining committee or the bargaining unit would only be the people who had their cards signed when it all started.
Okay. So like 2 people.
Yeah, basically. So they wanted to make sure that they had like a supermajority going before any negotiations started.
Yeah. Valid.
Yeah, like they're trying to hit the ground running and in the middle of a strike. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. It also seems to be a change in AFL policy because in previous strikes they've said that they wouldn't allow anyone into the federation until the strike was completed. So at some point in the 1920s that probably changed.
Okay.
So, or actually might have changed with the NRA. I don't know. But so Dewey, the guy from the National Recovery Agency, sent a report to Senator Robert Wagner telling him that there was nothing to negotiate yet since Ford had chosen to shut down the plant, which meant that this technically wasn't a strike or a lockout. It was
Sorry, go ahead.
It was just 5,000 unemployed workers making demands.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on the evening of, or overnight on the 27th, So day 2 of or the night after day 2 of the strike, organizers from Chester drove up to Edgewater, New Jersey, which is like North Jersey, right across from New York City. And they talked to the workers there to get them to support the strike going on down in Chester. So then on the morning of the 28th, 1,200 workers from the Edgewater assembly plant walked off the production line and onto the picket line. So they've now shut down 2 plants.
Okay.
Possibly 3. It's unclear whether or not the plant in Philly was still shut down at this point. But those 1,200 workers walked off, set up an apparently very peaceful picket line. But the entirety of the Edgewater police force was standing on the other side of the picket line watching them.
It's not going to be like 6 people, is it?
It was 25.
Ooh.
So, but it's 25 against 1,200.
Yeah.
But they remarked at how peacefully how peaceful everything was. And
the Edgewater Police, New Jersey.
Then a few carloads of pickets from Chester arrived, and at first the police pulled them out of the cars and searched the cars for weapons or alcohol, but didn't.
And alcohol.
Yeah, but didn't find anything. So they just let them go and join the picket line, and said that they wouldn't interfere so long as they didn't block traffic.
Okay.
So I was very confused at the behavior of the police in the beginning of this, but the apparently Edgewater Township and Chester, Pennsylvania, in this specific moment in 1933, had a not incredibly anti-union police force.
So we officially back the blue, right, Gabe?
Yes, that has always been the official stance of this podcast. That the delivery drivers and
what?
The postal workers.
Oh my God! Get this guy out of here.
Okay, so Chester strike still going on. There were only 1,000 men on the picket lines because they were now supporting both the strikes in Philly and the strikes up in Chester. Oh yeah, sorry. Forgot to mention, in Philly, carloads of men from Chester showed up around 2 a.m., then formed up around the Ford plant at Broad and Lehigh, and by 6 a.m., all of the entrances to the plant were covered with pickets. So just the plant in Chester was now supporting 3 strikes. The
visual of these picket lines. I know strikes are tough, but just the very beginning and all that energy, it's so fucking visceral, you know?
Yeah.
It's so cinematic.
I was really annoyed because there were barely any photos of these.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah. Especially just thinking about a bunch of probably Ford Model A's driving up into Philly at 2 a.m. and all of these guys unloading in the dead of night.
Dressed to the nines too.
Oh yeah. The strike down in Chester, they had assembled around the plant at about 8 o'clock, and every 15 minutes or so, someone from the crowd would get up and just make a speech. Because they weren't really, at this point, they didn't really need to block any of the entrances because they didn't find any scabs trying to get in.
Okay.
So they were basically just holding a round-the-clock rally.
All right.
And so they were making speeches, talking, just kind of hanging out. And then it was announced that paychecks had been mailed out the night before, but the men should return them to the plant and refuse the payment because it was technically their final paycheck and severance.
Okay.
So they were saying that if you accepted that payment, then you accepted that you were laid off. But if you refused it, by their logic, you were still an employee. I didn't quite follow that, but
If I don't cash this check, I'm not fired.
yeah, I broke the system. So
That reminds me of Office Space.
yeah,
He's like, "Did we fire him? Yeah, he's been. He found a loophole, but he's actually been fired 5 years ago."
yeah, we fixed the glitch. Okay, so by the end of the day, though, they had 300 pickets around every entrance to the plant. So 300 pickets across the whole plant.
Okay.
And things were starting to get a little bit more tense after the announcement of the paychecks, and they were realizing that this was going to be a longer fight.
Yeah.
So they then expanded their picketing operations after some questionable reports of people being smuggled into the plant overnight. They decided that they would now do a 24-hour picket line and prevent anyone from getting in.
Oh, shit.
Then they also told the strikers up in Edgewater that they should spread the strike to other plants in New York. So they're trying.
Damn.
Yeah. Basically, they're trying to do like an exponential growth kind of thing. So every strike would start a couple others. And
All right. I mean, they're blitzkrieging the thing.
Yeah, like it seems like they had plans to basically get all of the East Coast Ford plants to go on strike.
Yeah.
And just shut down production.
But without a long plan like that, I mean, geez.
Yeah.
I mean, like, they didn't, like, organize beforehand with all these plants.
Yeah, it seems to be, like, pretty much kind of organizing by the seat of your pants. But,
yeah.
I mean...
oh, that has to be a shirt or something.
I mean, it was effective, at least in Philly, Chester, and Edgewater. So,
yeah.
But the one problem they kept running into in Chester is that there were lots of rumors flying around. One of them was that someone said that the company was trying to sneak scabs in by boat. So the pickets or the strikers extended their picket line into the Delaware River.
Oh, what?
They got into boats and just like rowed out into the river and sat there on a picket duty. And basically the idea was that if you saw another boat coming in with presumably scabs, you would go and prevent them from docking and getting into the plant.
Is this the first instance of an amphibious picket line?
I guess so, yeah, because I mean Homestead, they were shipping in Pinkertons.
Yeah, they were,
but
that's different. I don't know.
Well, this is probably the first example that I know of, at least, of pickets extending into the water. That because Homestead, it was a land-based defense against an amphibious assault. This is a maritime defense against an amphibious assault. So,
Gabe, you make it sound so manly. This should be on like History Channel nowadays or some shit.
Oh God, Picket Line 360. Then it would very quickly devolve into aliens were telling the workers to organize.
Well, how do you think we got Sean Fain?
That's true.
Mm-hmm. I love that man.
This episode is very much in his honor. So,
he's still alive, though, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. That wasn't a threat.
Well, I didn't say in memorial.
Okay. Well, I mean, when you say in an honor, I mean...
That's fair. The picket line had extended into the water, and the police had started to occupy the plant itself, arming themselves with tear gas and machine guns.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, so they were getting ready to fight off any strikers, assuming things would get violent. Tensions were rising kind of everywhere. Then on September 30th, the strikers filed a complaint with the Delaware County Chamber of Commerce, arguing that the police were being used as messengers and food delivery men for the management and clerical workers who were still inside the plant. So basically, they were saying that the police were like delivering lunches inside the plant. So yeah, they filed that with the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm not sure if it went anywhere, but the police started to like not get more belligerent, but more threatening. So the police presence increased. There were more. They started threatening the workers with clubs and tear gas. But still everything was peaceful.
No machine guns yet.
Not yet. They were there. They just hadn't been used. So by October 6th, it was determined that pressure needed to be increased on Ford itself, the company, not just the plants. Because the 3 plants that were shut down were hurting Ford's ability to produce and sell cars. Mm-hmm. But they basically at this point they only had like 8,000 or 9,000 people on strike in an industry that had almost 500,000 workers.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Dropping the bucket.
Yeah. So like they were having an impact, but not nearly enough to really bring Ford to its knees.
Yeah.
And the NRA seemed basically unwilling to step in because Ford had found a loophole by shutting the plants down and saying that these aren't his workers anymore.
I've never seen these people before in my life.
Yeah. So then they decided they were going to bring the fight to Ford's doorstep and organized a motor march to Detroit. So 100 strikers from Philly, or 100 strikers from Edgewater, then more from Philly and Chester, started to drive to Detroit, where they would protest out front of Ford's headquarters and hopefully spread the union to the heart of the company there.
Yeah. Holy damn. Okay.
But it was supposed to be significantly more than what ended up, or than the number that actually ended up leaving. They were supposed to have 300 from Edgewater and only ended up with 100, and kind of the same with Philly and Chester. But there were, at the same time, there were rumors that they were going to be allowed to go back to work. And so, like, just at the last moment, enthusiasm for the motor march died down.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Because
they were, scared. They were like, "Oh shit, I don't have a job anymore."
Yeah.
So yeah, that's crazy.
And it's also possible that Ford closing the plant actually allowed the strike to continue, because then people basically figured, like, I don't have a choice. I have to keep picketing. So
that is also true.
But that same day, Ford officials announced that they would rehire all of the strikers except for those who started the walkout on the first day.
Oh, man.
So basically everyone except for the organizers.
Yeah.
Then they started to signal that they wanted to reopen the plant, knowing that this would lead to a strike, or lead to a clash between strikers and scabs. And my theory is that this was their attempt to finally break the union, because the police hadn't been touching or hadn't been doing anything.
Yeah.
The strikers seemed willing to continue, so they needed to apply pressure by bringing scabs in.
Yeah.
Then on October 14th, the NRA finally did something useful, saying that the NRA Labor Board wouldn't allow Ford to reopen the closed plants until a resolution was found in the strike. So now we have Ford saying, initially they won't open the plants again until a resolution is found. And the NRA saying you can't reopen the plants until you find a resolution.
Yeah.
And they wanted to force him to the negotiating table rather than having the strike get resolved in the streets, because everyone kind of saw that's what was about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Machine guns.
Yeah. The board also ruled that the strikers were still employees of the company.
Okay.
So that
Uh-huh.
kind of broke what Ford had been saying that whole time.
Yeah.
And then finally, at the end of all of that, Ford announced that on Monday, October 16th, the Chester plant would reopen with 900 men operating it. They had already sent out requests to all of the previous employees, asking them to come into work for examination and rehiring. And on Saturday, the 14th, it was reported that there were a large amount of cars out front of the plant. And possibly that men were working in the plant itself, but it seems like that was probably just the medical examinations before going back to work.
Okay.
Or basically they were starting the rehiring process.
Yeah.
Then and making sure that they weren't hiring any of the strike organizers.
Yeah.
So then, Monday, October 16th, 900 men reported for work in the plant, and the pickets allowed them through, just yelling insults at them. But there was no physical confrontation. Then, in the afternoon, as the men left the plant, the police, under command of Traffic Captain Charles Busher and Plant Superintendent James H. Davenport, formed a wall to prevent the strikers from interfering with the workers getting out of the plant and going to their vehicles. So then they forced a channel to open in the picket line to allow all the cars out and onto the street. This whole time, the strikers are just yelling insults at the scabs and trying to discourage them. But once the cars got away from the police line, they started throwing bricks at them.
Ooh, here we go.
Yep.
Oh.
So there were a couple minor car crashes because people were flooring it to get out of there. Then at 5th and Lloyd Street, so 5 blocks away from the plant, the strikers had set up a little ambush point because they knew that that's where the cars were going to have to go through.
Yeah.
At 5th and Lloyd, they threw a fusillade of bricks. So just chucking an endless stream of bricks at the cars, only stopping when the police arrived and began making arrests. 4 men were arrested immediately. 2 gave their driver's license information and were then later arrested by State Highway Patrol as they were driving away. I don't know why they weren't arrested initially and then arrested later, but regardless.
That's on the listeners to figure out.
Yeah.
That's on you.
Do my work for me. So then Michael F. Gudiello,
Better name.
Yeah. Who is the treasurer for the union, which at this point had been formed and was formalized. He came back to Chester so that he could be present for the hearing of the 6 men that had gotten arrested. Then at the plant itself, the police were armed with tear gas rifles, and Superintendent Davenport threatened that if there were any disruptions there, they would use them. The union's committee members basically tried to calm the whole crowd down and knew that if anything escalated at this point, it was going to turn into a riot, and they didn't want that. So they tried to keep everyone calm. And aside from 6 arrests and some bricks being thrown at cars, that day ended kind of peacefully. On October 7th or 17th, there was heavy rain, which basically meant there weren't a lot of pickets out there.
Mm-hmm.
But an arbitrator had finally been named. Senator Wagner had been working behind the scenes to set up an arbitration process and start negotiations. The Ford was demanding that whoever was chosen could have no connections to organized labor, because they wanted someone business friendly.
Okay.
So then meetings took place between elected leaders from the strike and managers from the Edgewater plant and Chester, but no resolution was reached. Members from the strike committee were also dispatched to Washington, D.C. to meet with the Federal Labor Board representatives, and negotiations finally started after 3 weeks of striking. Then October 18th was a much clearer, nice, sunny fall day.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And so the picket lines were full again. And as cars pulled out of the plant at 4 p.m., a piece of brick was thrown at them.
Oh, not good.
Yeah. Captain Charles Busher ordered the crowd to leave the area and fired a single tear gas canister
Jesus.
into the picket line.
Okay.
The crowd broke up, but the workers had spread tacks, like caltrops, to pop the tires.
All right, Twisted Metal.
Yeah. So they'd spread them at every intersection around the plant.
Oh my God.
Yep. So as everyone was driving away, their tires were popping. Then state highway patrol cars came in and protected the lines of scabs as they were fleeing the area, and like cleared out the tacks and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's also noted that the union at this point was growing really quickly, that they had already signed up a lot of other men, and that they basically had been like going out every day on the picket line and just getting everyone to sign cards.
Good.
Yeah. Then on Friday the 20th, they held a mass meeting to discuss the union, and they were encouraged to keep it together and maintain pressure on Ford. This was encouragement from the AFL. As they moved forward with the strike, they reported to the news that Ford had still not been willing to actually negotiate on anything, but that the NRA was putting more pressure on him. Then, finally, October 25th, a grievance hearing was announced. Officials from Ford would meet with union reps to go over workers' grievances, and this was the first time that Ford had actually been willing to engage in any amount of bargaining.
Was it because of the pressure from the NRA?
Probably. From what I can tell, it was probably a mix of that and that this was actually starting to affect his bottom line.
Uh-huh. There we go.
Because he, like, Ford had no problems just telling the federal government to fuck off.
Yeah. Because money, you can do that with money, Gabe.
Yeah. Yep. Then, finally, on November 2nd, a plan was sent to the NRA Labor Board, ostensibly to resolve the Edgewater strike, but it seems that it also resolved the Chester strike.
Okay.
It provided 3 of the 4 demands, including collective bargaining, and brought Ford into compliance with the National Industrial Recovery Act. But
man,
basically what the final deal was that Ford would still not sign the auto code of the National Industrial Recovery Act, but he would comply with it in spirit.
What?
And in exchange, the NRA would essentially let the auto industry police itself.
Oh, nice.
As part of this, he said he would recognize his employees' right to form a union, but he would resist any outside organizers from being allowed to come in and talk to the workers.
This fucking guy, man.
Yep. So that meant that like the AFL couldn't send an organizer. It had to just spontaneously happen within his own workers.
I don't even like to jokingly like this guy anymore.
Yeah, he gets worse every time I hear anything about it. Like, now this early union didn't seem to last very long. And I think what probably happened is that it got pretty much immediately replaced with a company union. Because if Ford is only allowing a union from his own workers, he's going to basically have management like form a union for the workers.
Yeah. Which is great.
Yeah.
Always works out.
And it's also worth knowing that the day after Ford agreed to follow the rules of the National Industrial Recovery Act and supposedly agreed to collective bargaining, he laid off 9,000 workers in Michigan. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. But we have a happy ending.
Hey!
That in 1935 the UAW was formed in the Flint Sintown strikes. But yeah, so that was kind of a weird strike that like kind of spat and sputtered a little bit, and then there was definitely some violence at the end there, and then just kind of fizzled out.
Yeah,
but it was
it's those little ones, you know.
Yeah,
and I mean this wasn't exactly little, but I mean it's those little stories about them that really should get out.
And I've been kind of fascinated by the organizing before the National Labor Relations Act in 1935.
Okay.
Because there was just that weird period of like the official stance was, yes, you can do this, but there was no framework for it. They were just like, yeah, yes. Sure.
There was just question marks on everything.
Yeah. But it led to everyone just being like, okay, let's go fucking do this.
It was the Wild West back then.
Yeah. And depending on who you ask in the labor movement, having less government involvement in it is actually better. So
yeah, that can be true. So
yeah. Looking at you, rail industry.
Gabe, thanks for the episode.
You're welcome.
Hey, this is Gabe, and thanks for listening to the Labor Jawn podcast. So for now, we live in a system called capitalism. And under this system, you have to exchange currency for goods and or services. And to that end, Sam and I put a lot of time, effort, and a fair chunk of our own money into keeping this podcast available and generally free. And if you'd like to help support us doing that, you can give us some money at patreon.com/LaborJawn. And if you choose to do so, we'll give you a fancy button every year, some cool merch, and an extra episode once a month, whenever possible, because life is hard, because capitalism. Anyway, we'd really appreciate your support if you've got a few bucks to spare. Also, if you happen to be a member of a union and you want your fellow union members to learn about local labor history, we do commission work like presentations, pamphlets, that kind of stuff. So if that sounds cool, you can shoot us an email at laborjawn@gmail.com or contact us through laborjawn.com or message us on social media or whatever's most convenient for you. But if that sounds interesting, feel free to reach out. And anyway, thanks for listening. Solidarity. Have fun.